training for school food authorities completing the fixed meal price food service management company request for proposal template. As you will notice, we use the acronyms SFA for school food authorities, which is your school district, FSMC for the food service management company, and RFP for the request for proposal throughout the training and in the RFP document. So I just wanted to point those out here at the beginning, as you'll be hearing those a lot throughout this process. First off, we just wanted to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us for today's training. Just a few housekeeping items to get started with here. If you have not already done so, can you please type your name and email in the chat box? That way we just know who attended today's training and we can follow up by email if needed. Please mute your microphone to avoid any disruptions or feedback throughout the presentation. Turn on your camera if you would like to, or if you have that feature available. We would like to see your faces. Use the chat box to ask questions, or feel free to unmute your microphone and ask questions throughout the presentation. We will be monitoring the chat box today, trying to get to questions, but know that if we don't get to your question, we will also have time for questions and answers at the end of this presentation. So we will make sure that we get to everybody's questions during that time as well. Up next, I just wanted to introduce you to the NDE Nutrition Services Program Specialist who work with SFA's contracting with food service management companies. Starting on the left, we have Allie Lampman, and she works out of the Lincoln office. And then myself, Erica Arter, I also work out of the Lincoln office. In the middle, we have Sean Vondracek, who works out of the Lincoln office. And the three of us will be the ones approving and helping you complete the RFP template and the RFP process this school year. Your assigned specialist was listed in the email reminder sent with today's training materials. And then on the right, we also have Laura Lutz and Jessica Fermansky out of the North Platte office, and they help us complete those first year food service management company reviews, which are reviews required by the USDA in the first year of a new contract. They do those reviews for schools located in their territory in the western part of the state, since they're out of the North Platte office. So we're happy to have them help us on our team as well. So our audience today is SFAs, or schools who in school year 2021 were required to rebid, but elected to non-competitively secure a one-year contract for school year 21-22 with their current food service management company. This was allowed through COVID-19 Child Nutrition Response Waiver number 71, which was released January 6th of 2021. So these schools did not have to go through the competitive RFP process last school year due to the pandemic, but these are one-year contracts and they're not renewable. So these schools are required to complete the RFP process to obtain a contract for school year 22-23. There are currently no USDA waivers that would allow an option like this for this school year. We figured that might be a question, so we wanted to let you know that, that as of right now, there are no USDA waivers that would allow that. We also have SFAs currently in their fourth renewal year of their FSMC contracts in school year 21-22, meaning they need to secure a new contract for school year 22-23. And we also have some SFAs that are currently self-operated, but they are interested in pursuing a food service management company for school year 22-23. So just to give you an idea of who's on the training today. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Sean to kind of talk about COVID and all of those waivers that we've had the past couple of years. Is Sean with us?
I am so sorry.
There she is.
I'm here. I'm sorry. Always have to remember to unmute myself. But thank you, Eric. I appreciate you turning it over to me to talk about the COVID from a USDA waivers perspective and what has happened for the last 21 months since the pandemic officially kind of started. So there have been 106 waivers that have impacted your school meals program. And the most significant to mention include starting in March of 2020 and through the start of this school year, SFAs participated in the summer food service program and provided meals free of charge to children. This was a new program for many SFAs. Participation in the program required completing a new application, learning a new set of regulations, following a different meal pattern in planning and serving meals, and through USDA waivers allowed for different delivery styles of meals, such as grab and go, parent pickup, delivery to homes, just any way to get the kids fed. At the start of this school year in August, SFAs could no longer participate when school was in session through the summer food service program, but could participate in the seamless summer option, which is an option allowed under the school meals program. The rationale for this change was to transition SFAs back to what used to be normal food service operations during the school year. So with this change, it included requiring the traditional school meal patterns. Students are still provided meals free of charge, and USDA is reimbursing those meals at the higher rate of federal reimbursement. And as you can see on the slide, what those rates of reimbursement are currently, and those rates will be increasing in January because they follow the summer food service program. Even though we're not operating that program, USDA realizes it's costing more to feed students. So let's go to the next slide, Allie. Okay, and I know we all know this pandemic continues, and we feel the impacts in our daily and our work lives. In the food service world, it is affecting staffing, not only in your schools, but in companies where the food and supplies come from. The delivery of those items to your school is impacted, and we all know there are major problems with the supply chain. Your food service directors are faced with big challenges of trying to get food in the door to feed students. And we all are seeing the shock of rising food costs when we go to the grocery store, and probably when you're reviewing, if you're a self-operated program, those invoices from your food companies. So with all of that said, we need to move to the next slide. And preparing your RFP in school year 21-22. I think we just need to realize it's going to be a difficult year for SFAs to prepare the fixed price food service management company request for proposal and it's going to be a difficult year for our food service management companies to prepare their proposals, because we have not had normal school year operations since school year 18-19. We are asking for more information to be included in the Rfp package. So just be aware of that, because our food service management companies need to have at least a vision of what normal used to look like. Companies want to ensure that whatever they propose for their fixed meal pricing will cover all expenses and will also generate the profit that they need to keep in business. So with that said, you may experience some sticker shock with the fixed meal prices you may see in the proposals you receive this year. So moving on to the next slide, Allie. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, our agenda includes planning for your future, the SFA's future food service operations. We're going to discuss the RFP process, and that includes completing the RFP package. And I call it a package because it not only includes the RFP template that we sent to you, and please use the most current one that we sent yesterday. And if you have already started before you received the email yesterday, the changes in it are very, very minor. So we wouldn't ask you to retype everything. They're very minor. But we wanted to get a corrected copy to you, so that's why we sent it again yesterday. But the package includes that template, the completed template, as well as the exhibits and charts that are asked for in the document. So then it becomes the package. And we will also be discussing today the checklist that was sent to you. This is a new tool this year, and we developed it in order to help you know what needs to be included in the package with the charts and exhibits. And I think you will find it very helpful as you compile your information, because once again, you are creating the picture of your district by the charts and exhibits and the information you include in your RFP. And we will also be discussing some tips on conducting the pre-proposal meeting. And the pre-proposal meeting is where the food service management companies can view your food service operation and your school buildings, because they want to see what you are currently doing. What is your current operation, and what do you have in regards to equipment layout to do that? We will also be going through how to complete the equipment list that were sent in the email, and that's later in the presentation. And then there will be plenty of opportunity for you to ask questions, and hopefully we can provide you with some answers. You can certainly enter your questions in the chat, or you can wait till the end of the presentation, whatever you feel comfortable with. So next slide. Oh, and I don't want to forget, I promise we will wrap up no later than 12. And if you need to jump off at any time, because I know you're all very busy folks out there, this is going to be recorded and posted on the Nutrition Services website by next Friday. So if you can't stay for all of it, no problem. We will be recording it. So thank you, Allie. So where do we start in this process, and what do you need to do? Well, it's important for you to be aware that because your school receives federal dollars, you must follow all of the regulations required of procurement. If you're wondering why the RFP template is 102 pages long, it's because it includes all the regulations pertaining to the school meals program, the summer food service program. There's an area that addresses the fresh fruit and vegetable program and the child and adult care food program. So it's pretty all-inclusive of what regulations have to be followed by both the SFA and the food service management company in managing the food service program for the SFA. We suggest you read and refer to the USDA guidance manual, Contracting with Food Service Management Companies, and it is designed for school food authorities, contains very, very useful information, and it really details the contracting process. So next slide, Allie. So what do you need to do? Well, as you think about completing the RFP, you need to be aware that this is a 1-year contract with the option of 4 1-year renewals. So it is essentially, in effect, if the options for renewal are taken, a 5-year contract. The contract year runs July 1st through June 30th. And as you think about preparing the RFP, you need to really think about what changes are going to impact your food service program in the next 5 years. And that might be new buildings, remodels, changes in grade configurations in buildings. If you have an open campus for your high school or certain grades in your high school, is there any possibility that you will be closing campus to those grades? Will you have the potential for having new programs such as preschool meals, after school care snack? If you're not participating or applying for the fresh fruit and vegetable program, is that a program that you would want to participate in if you were eligible to participate in? If you've not operated the summer food service program in a normal school year, would you be operating it if you were eligible in a normal school year now that you're familiar with it? Are there any different service models that you want to implement, such as grab and go for breakfast? Or maybe more options with grab and go for lunch? What is your school doing in regard to farm to school? And would you want to increase those efforts if you're not doing any farm to school, or if you currently have a good farm to school program, what do you envision maybe doing in the future? So it's really thinking ahead what you would like your food service program to be and what it has to be if you have any new buildings or remodeling. So moving on to the next slide, we would encourage you to reach out to some of the other schools that have food service management company contracts. We have 40 SFAs that choose to outsource their food service management company, or to outsource their food service to management companies. We have 5 food service management companies that are currently operating in Nebraska. We have 5 food service management companies that would like to operate in Nebraska. And so, call superintendents and find out what they think of how their company is operating in their district. Maybe if the opportunity comes up, go and visit how they're operating, it's best to see things in action. So those are just some ways to gain education and get more information by reaching out to those that are currently contracting. Next slide. So some basic information that you need to be aware of is the RFP has been released, the template has been released, and the template and exhibits and charts, the first draft needs to be submitted to NDE no later than January 15th. And you will be sending that to the program specialist assigned to work with your SFA. We will work with you throughout the process, because what we are doing is to make sure that your information is complete and it creates an accurate picture of what's currently happening in your district, and it provides enough detail to describe what you would like to see in the future. So we work with you to create that picture and to make sure that everything has been completed. And because we're looking at somewhat of a short window of time, because we've got some holidays in here before January 15th, we suggest you start now. Okay, if you are able to complete the package before January 15th, please submit it to your specialist and we will do our best to review it. We also are taking some time off during the holidays, so just be aware of that. And throughout the process, it's important to realize that we're working with a lot of schools during this time. And your responsiveness is critical in order that we get a contract in place by July 1st. So, we'll work with you the best we can. We'll email you, we'll remind you, but we do need, and superintendents, business managers, those responsible for completing this, we understand that you are juggling a lot on your plates. And so we're very sympathetic to your needs, but it is a process that needs to follow a timeline. Next slide. Well, and the good news today is we're not going to be reviewing all 102 pages of the RFP, which becomes the contract today. We're only going to be focusing on the areas that we feel we need to explain a little bit more in detail. And so in preparation of today's review of those areas, we sent you yesterday the pages that we're going to be talking about. And so if you're able to pull those up on your computer, or if you printed those, it would be helpful. And I know we haven't been going very long, but this will be a good transition point for Allie to move to the actual handouts. And so we'll be taking like a 5-minute break right here for you to stand, stretch, do whatever you need, and then come back. And we will start reviewing those sample pages of the RFP. So now's your break. We'll see you back at 10.
Have a break.
You have a break? Well, Allie, you did that amazingly fast. But we're still on break. So stand, stretch, do what you need to.
That look okay, Sean?
That a little bigger.
A little bigger?
Well, you know what? I have gallery view going, so Erica.
That why can't it now is fine, Allie.
Okay, it looks good to me.
Okay.
5 minutes goes by rather quickly, and I hope you're back with us. If the opportunity comes up and you can turn on your cameras for just a little bit, it's always very helpful to see who we will be communicating with throughout this process. So a big thanks to those that have their cameras on. And if you feel comfortable enough, I know, Jennifer, you don't have a camera, that's fine. But if you do, please turn it on for just a little bit so we get to see who we're talking with. And also, if you jumped on a little bit late and you didn't have the opportunity to put your name and your email address and maybe your school name in the chat, we would ask that you do that now. Okay, let's go ahead and start with the sample RFP. And the first page is simple. You just need to put the name of your school on the first page. And we start with the simple stuff first, and now we'll get to the more complicated items of completing the RFP. And the RFP is the request for proposal for food service management company services in your school. And if we move to the next page, we still have something pretty simple we're going to be talking about. Just a little tip that if you click on the page number, it will take you to that page in the RFP. So that's helpful as we talk about things when we're communicating with you. It's a big document. This is just a tool that will help us as we navigate through the RFP. And then we move on into general information. And I want to remind everyone, this is a legal document. We certainly aren't lawyers at NDE, and you're dealing with program specialists. And this is a contract between your school district and the food service management company. We've included all of the regulations in the template, but as far as more specific information that you're allowed to put, you certainly do want to seek guidance from your own legal counsel, particularly when you are choosing what company based on your scoring of proposals. Just need to say that it's a legal contract. And the process, the whole RFP is very important for you to be familiar with and to read. But there's certain areas of the RFP that are more important. And of course, the process is very important. And we as nutrition services are required to review your RFP package and provide approval before it can be released to companies that are interested in receiving the proposal. So we have to make sure it's complete. And then after the school has made the selection of what company based on their proposal that they would like to contract with, we need to see that proposal as well for approval prior to the signing of the contract. And with that, we need the following items sent to your assigned specialist, and you can do that all at one time, or you can do that throughout the process, because we need to file them so that we ensure that there was free and open competition and that you followed the steps that are required in procuring your contract. So this is important information. Make sure you're familiar with this process. Allie, I'll have you go ahead and scroll down. And after NDE, and that would be your program specialist that's assigned, has granted approval of the contract, it can be signed by the SFA and the food service management company. And that signature page, as well as the signatures on Exhibit K, which happens to be the independent price determination certification, must be sent to NDE because we have to have a signed contract in our office. Moving on down. Once the RFP package has been approved by our office, a notification needs to appear in the Omaha World Herald because you are required to advertise in a statewide newspaper. Guidance does not indicate the extent that that advertisement or notification needs to appear. So we say one time because it's expensive to place notifications. And then that notification must be sent to all food service management companies listed on page 94 and 96 of the RFP template. And that would include the 5 companies that are currently operating in Nebraska and the 5 that have expressed interest in operating in Nebraska. And it's not sending the entire RFP package, it's providing that notification to those companies. And then it's on them to reach out to you to request the package. Because not all companies are going to be interested in your school district. We have some companies that choose just to operate in bigger districts. And we have some companies that operate in our smaller districts. So the notification is what is emailed the same day that the notification appears in the Omaha World Herald. So let's scroll on down, and it's just that notification that appears at the top. It's just that basic information is all that is required. And the timeline. I've already mentioned some important dates. Now, for our districts that are required to rebid, that would be those that are currently in a 1-year contract. Because of the waiver that was allowed by USDA last year, you're required to go out for bid. For our schools that are in their 4th year renewal, as of right now, you are required to go out for bid. There's been no waiver indication from USDA that anything will be allowed for next year. So that's 11 of our SFAs at this point are required to go out for bid. For our schools that are interested in pursuing a management company, maybe on the fence right now, not for sure. The December 1st deadline is the date for notifying our office of your intent. And then the package for all SFAs need to be submitted by January 15th. And the March 1st and May 15th dates are fluid. You know, they're somewhat fluid in that those have some flexibility, but we have to have a contract in place by July 1st. And there's a lot, for many of you that have went through this process before, you know, it's a lot of back and forth, not only with our office, but also with the company after you have made your decision, because you can ask for clarification from the proposals that you're going with, because you will find that we probably will need some clarification. So that's the timeline. Moving on to the next slide. just basic information on, you know, who to contact, who's going to be the contact in the district in regard to sending out the notification, receiving the proposals, conducting the pre-proposal meeting, answering questions that companies may have, our contact. So just make sure that that person is indicated. And our companies that respond and submit proposals, they need to make sure, or you need to ensure, and they need to be sure that they have a complete response to information contained in the RFP. And moving on down the page, Allie, important information is the procurement method is competitive proposal, and you must use the template that was sent. You must solicit proposals from an adequate number of respondents. And so that's why we ask that you send it to the 10 contacts, the 10 food service management companies listed, that you receive an adequate number. And that's really that, you know, we've had schools that have not gotten any proposals after going through the process, and or they've gotten one. And, you know, a school can always choose not to contract, even if they get 6 proposals and they find none of them meet the needs of what they want. It's totally dependent on the responses from companies. And so your specialist will work with you through that process. You evaluate proposals based on the weighted criteria that's identified in the RFP, and award the contract to the food service management company that is the most responsive and responsible to your solicitation. And cost has to be one of the most looked at or scored, has to receive the most points in the award criteria. Okay. And we'll go through that in a little bit. And so let's see, as I mentioned already, once you get a proposal, there may be some clarification that needs to happen with that proposal, and that will be in the form of an addendum to the proposal, and we will work with you through that for the purposes of clarifying terms and conditions. And there's no disclosure, of course, of any information derived from proposals submitted to competing food service management companies. No sharing of information, all confidential. And let's move to the next slide. We have a timeline, your timeline for submitting information, and the dates you list in the document that, or the package you submit to us in January. Just be aware those dates may be subject to change based on the completeness of the information that you submit to us and the back and forth that might be required in getting that information more complete. But you can certainly put in tentative dates. That would be fine, but just be aware that they are subject to change. And there is a 60 calendar day period from the time that the notification appears in the Omaha World Herald, at a minimum 60 days until proposals are received by the district. So 60-day solicitation period. You should plan for your pre-proposal conference approximately 2 weeks after the notification appears. There's some flexibility with that also, because for sure we have 11 SFAs that will be going out for bid this year. We certainly want to ensure that we're not planning pre-proposal meetings all on the same day, because we want you to have good representation. We will be looking at that when those dates are and working with you. 11 is a pretty substantial number of SFAs that are going out for bid. And if that number increases, then we will certainly just keep our calendar updated and provide you with options. Then the date that the proposals are received, and the process of scoring those proposals is pretty flexible, but within 10 business days of receiving proposals, that's when your team, your review team needs to meet and independently score proposals based on the criteria in the RFP. And then once that selection is made, the proposal that is accepted is submitted to NDE, your specialist, for review. And then that can be before or after board approval, whatever your process is. Just be aware that it has to be approved by our office before it can be signed. And then sending in the signature page, Exhibit K, and their approved addendum if there is one. And that will make your contract package, your RFP contract package complete. And there's the disclaimer at the bottom of the timeline that changes can happen. And so just be aware of that. Now, we've talked briefly about the pre-proposal meeting, and that is a mandatory meeting, and it should be conducted virtually or a hybrid, which is virtual and in person. And that is your decision how you want to conduct that pre-proposal meeting. We are still in a pandemic, and it is impacting different parts of Nebraska differently. And there's schools that are closing grades in some areas because of outbreaks of COVID. And we need to be considerate of our companies coming on site. And so that is why there is that virtual component, because we're talking about this now, and because of the pandemic and not being able to foresee what might happen in January or February, the hybrid option or the virtual need to be decided. So you must indicate that in the RFP what your plan is. It needs to be conducted on a school day so that our companies can actually see normal operations. Need to be able to view meal service at feeding sites serving the different grade groups. And so if you are a district that has elementary buildings, middle school buildings, and high school buildings, they need to be see meal service in one of each of those buildings to see the flow. Alternate feeding locations, where food is going. A company is in business to serve food, but they need to know the layout of the buildings and also your serving and dining area, your kitchen areas. That's all so important to a company. Be aware that any questions asked by the food service management company should be submitted in writing, and responses to those questions should come back in writing, and for all interested food service management companies that attend your pre-proposal meeting, they receive that information. They receive the questions and they receive the answers to those questions. And do not answer questions at the pre-proposal meeting. If you're conducting it virtually or hybrid, we want to ensure everyone hears the same thing. So we suggest you not answer any questions at the pre-proposal meeting. You are there just to tour the facility and to welcome the companies to submit their proposals. So moving on down the page, Allie, the timeline for questions and answers. Companies need to submit their questions to you approximately 30 calendar days prior to the submission of their proposal, and you need to respond back to those questions 15 days before the proposals are due, because they're trying to get specific information to complete their proposals, and you need to provide those answers. And you will be receiving questions periodically. You'll receive questions after the pre-proposal meeting. You'll probably receive questions during the solicitation period up to this 30 calendar days before. They can be answered periodically and sent out. And your assigned specialist is there to help you with any of your questions. And sometimes it's just a good idea to run those by your specialist to make sure that we understand what the company's asking and you're providing the information that they need. So your specialist is there to help you with those questions. So moving on down the page, we'll go to the next. Companies need to submit 2 hard copies of their proposals and 1 electronic copy. That electronic copy of the proposal that you select will be the one that you send on to us via email so that we can review it. And if you want to adjust that number, you certainly can. We just say 2. If you need more for hard copies for your evaluation committee, that's your call. And hard copies of proposals, we in number 4, we go through that. Copies of all documents pertaining to the award of contract shall be kept by the SFA and shall be open to public inspection. Once it comes to us, it's public record. Once you have it, it's public record. And that's spelled out in the contract, or spelled out in the RFP contract. And number 5 just addresses that it's the school's option, reserves the right to accept any proposals which it deems most favorable to the interest of the SFA, and can reject any proposal or any portion of a proposal submitted which the SFA, in the SFA's opinion, is not in the best interest of the SFA. So there's where that comes in, that you can go through the process and still make the decision not to outsource your food service if you find that the proposals you received aren't in the best interest of your district. And let's see, moving on down, we have an exhibit called F that's contained in the template that provides you the opportunity to include any additional services that you feel would benefit your district. And so that's an important section I want to draw your attention to. It's where you add specifics. And we will go through that when Erica goes through the charts and exhibits. And moving on down, the award criteria. Who should evaluate your proposals? Well, your committee needs to be more than just you. It needs to be a minimum of at least 2. And those individuals will be scoring the proposals received. Each committee member must evaluate the proposals independently and assign a point value to each award criteria. And the scoring cannot be done as a group. Score sheets from each committee member, in addition, must be combined and submitted to NDE. And you will find that there is a form for scoring, and it's called Attachment I, or Attachment 1. And it's at the end of the RFP document. And just be aware that when companies aren't awarded contracts where they feel that they have submitted the best price and have the best programs that they can offer a school district, they want to know why. And they have requested the completed combined scoring sheets when not awarded. And you want to be aware of that because you do not want any protests from any company. And just a heads up on that we asked for that documentation. You need to keep that documentation, and we'll move on to the next page. Cost must receive the highest number of assigned points. And that is your determination of how to award points. Just be aware that costs must have the highest number, but there's other factors that you need to consider as you look at the proposals. And on the following pages, we include what companies need to be, what they need to include in their proposals. You don't need to move further, Allie. But these are the categories that they have to respond to in their proposals. And then you assign points to each of those categories based on what you feel is most important for your school district. It just needs to add up to 100. Okay, 100 points. And so certainly your call. We have had some SFAs give a huge number to cost, and then that really locks them in when they receive proposals, not looking so much at the service capacity plan, all those other things that are important also. So it is really your determination of how you want to score these, but cost must have the most points. Moving on down. You must check all the programs that you are currently operating in your SFA. And so in our sample, we can see that my Make Believe school district participates in a lot of programs. And they've indicated that by marking the boxes. And they've included some comments like they operated the summer food service program when they operated it. Now they're operating the Seamless Summer program. And they participate in preschool breakfast meal service, lunch meal service. They also vend to a private school and a daycare. So they've indicated that. They do have catering. They do farm to school efforts, and they've indicated what those specific efforts are, that they utilize donated beef. The food service pays for processing. They have school gardens. They purchase locally. They have a school store where a la carte items can be purchased, as well as students can get a reimbursable meal through their store. They've indicated that their 12th graders can leave campus, which that's super important to indicate, because if grades can leave campus, then a company needs to figure out how they can keep those kids on campus to participate in the meal service. And so you need to include as much detail as possible about what you're currently doing. The next page is what you plan to do. So anticipate changes to your existing program planned in the next 5 years. So we want you to mark the box, even if remotely possible. And the reason for that is if there is a material change to the contract, then you have to go out for bid again. So if you had a program that's going to significantly alter what you're currently doing in regard to cost or services expected, then you have to go out for bid if it's not indicated in this original solicitation. So, you know, if there's the potential for increasing vended meals where you sell to another entity, then mark that, even though you don't know what that might be. If there's construction planned, if you're opening new buildings, it's creating that picture of what can happen in the district. So look under other and you'll see construction, remodeling in the future, plan to open a new elementary, remodel of middle school kitchen. They have another private school that has reached out to them for vended meals. They currently have a company stocking the vending machines, but they want to move that to food service. So just provide as much detail as possible. And you're not required to indicate a date of when you anticipate those changes to happen. A company may ask that in a question, but if you don't know, then the column just is blank because you don't know when that's going to be happening. But you know, I know schools plan a long ways in the future, and if you know you're going to be having a remodel in this school year, then you would indicate that. So moving on down, this addresses catering, you know, providing food that isn't part of necessarily the school meals program. If you want the company to do that, then we suggest you mark everything. And if you don't know if you want them to do that, mark everything, because that is outside of the contract. That is between the food service management company and the organization or club that is requesting the food service, and it's treated as a catering where the company directly bills that organization pays the company. And it's all spelled out in the RFP about how that's outside of the contract and how a company can charge for that. So moving on down, we'll probably just, please read all of this because it has all of the regulations cited. This one is pertaining to special diets and in regard to milk substitutes. And this is one that has to be answered. The SFA must indicate below if the food service management company is to provide approved fluid milk substitutes for students who request. And the key there is request. So it doesn't rise to being like a milk allergy or an intolerance maybe, where a physician is not involved that would sign off that the student cannot have milk. So it's like, oh, I drink milk once in a while, it gives me an upset tummy, I need a substitute. So it's not a have to. It's something that a school decides if they want to accommodate for. And so you need to indicate if you will be providing that, if requested or not. doing that if requested. But as a reminder for students who require a milk substitute as indicated on a signed medical statement, the SFA must accommodate. So there is a difference, request versus required. So moving on down. Purchasing. The SFA must check one of the purchasing options stated below, and you will be marking the second one. Except for Exhibit D, Chart 8, designated program expenses duties, the SFA will do all purchasing for food service programs. So when we get to Exhibit D, this will make more sense to you. Who does the purchasing for what? And we're required to have both boxes in our template, but you need to mark the second one. This is a fixed price food service management company, RFP. So we'll move on down the page, Allie. USDA foods is the next section I want to talk about. And these are pre-marked in the RFP template because it covers everything with USDA foods. The boxes can be unmarked, but for your convenience, we have marked them for you. They're pre-marked. And if you want more information in regard to USDA foods, that is administered through a different agency, through Health and Human Services. And Chad Moore is the director of USDA foods. That would be your, formally it was commodities. And that's your entitlement that you're granted every year. You can contact Chad for more information in regard to, the different ways to receive that. And we'll just scroll on down. Employees. We need to talk about employees. The SFA must designate if the current SFA employees, and this would be very important for our self-operated programs and for our schools that have existing food service management companies that have district employees that work in the food service department to consider and plan for. The SFA must designate if the current SFA employees will be retained by the SFA or be subject to employment by the food service management company. And in the example that we're showing today, the SFA is indicating that some of the POS or the point of service cashiers are SFA employees and will continue with their responsibility. If the SFA wants the food service management company to assume all responsibilities of the POS or cashiers, then the food service management company, SSMC, would be marked. So designation of employees is very important. Who will be employed by the food service management company? Their employment status will be for the duration of the contract and impacts the proposed fixed meal pricing. So it's looking ahead for those 5 years on how you mark this in regard to employees. The food service director has to be an employee of the food service management company, but the other employees can be district employees and paid by the district. So your program specialist can help you with this also. Those are pretty important decisions to make. Moving on. The SFA will allow the food service management company to submit proposals which include Do you want a full-time on-site food service director not shared with any other SFAs? Or are you willing to share a food service director with another SFA? If you're willing to share, or currently are and think that's might be the best option for you in the future, you would still mark both, because not every company has food service directors that can be shared. Okay, they don't have close enough SFAs that they can share a director. So just be aware of that. Indicate what you want, and we'll move on down the page. This is the pricing page that is completed by the food service management company. And it's important that you receive this completed page in all food service management company proposals. And I say that because in the past, when companies have submitted proposals, some have not completed this page, and you find it in various places through their proposal. And it makes it difficult for an SFA to find it all, for our office to find it all. And so we've now included in the template, this chart is required to be completed by the food service management company. And that's for your convenience in your award, in your scoring and award, as well as for review by our office. And as we move on down the page, based on the programs that you indicate in current and future, a company will submit pricing per meal for each one of those categories. And on this page, if you are requesting a guarantee, then the company needs to indicate what that guarantee that they're proposing is, because that guarantee applies not only for year one, but for each of the 4 additional renewal options. And then, of course, the contract value. So we'll move on down to the next page, and now we talk about the guarantee. In my example, I have the SFA is requesting the food service management company propose a guarantee. The food service management company guarantees the food service will be self-supporting with an excess of, they indicate what that excess will be, during school year 22-23, and no less during the first year of the food service management company contract, as well as any renewal periods. So it requires the SFA to submit a guarantee. If you mark the first one, it's the SFA is not requesting a guarantee and will allow the food service management company to propose a guarantee. But then the food service management company also has the option of not proposing a guarantee. And you want a company that is going to be able to run your program efficiently and maintain a balance in your food service account. So this is the guarantee section. And I am going to keep talking. I thought for a minute that I was turning it over to Erica, but I jumped the gun for a minute. I want to talk about equipment. You must indicate the financing of equipment. And in my example, I have the SFA will purchase all non-expendable equipment. This would be your capital equipment, your ovens, your items that are above whatever your capitalization threshold is. The federal capitalization threshold is $5,000, and you may have a different capitalization threshold, but and you have to indicate that if you want the company to purchase any equipment. We suggest not, okay, because this is a 1-year contract, what do you do with the equipment then after a company purchases it? So you have to indicate that lower on the page. If a company indicates that, what happens to it? If the second box is marked, you must complete. Are you going to reimburse the company for the unpaid portion of the equipment? Are you going to let the company take the equipment back? It's just cleaner if the school district purchases the non-expendable equipment. And definitions, we didn't discuss the section that has the different definitions of terms in our review today, but once again, you need to be reading the RFP and be familiar with what's in the RFP, because we do provide the definitions of what non-expendable and expendable equipment are, as well as 3 other pages full of definitions. So what does make up the contract? The contract it incorporates exhibits A through L, the SFA's RFP, the entire agreement, and any documents that are submitted, the proposal that the company submits, this addendum that I've talked about for clarification of the proposal, all signature pages. That's the contract. And then the agreement page. The agreement page is not signed until after the entire package is submitted to us, again, for approval, which includes the RFP, the proposal, the addendum, all exhibits. That's the RFP package. And we approve, and then the contract can be signed by both the SFA and the Food Service Management Company and implemented by July 1st. Now I am going to turn it over to Erica, and she's going to be talking with you about the Summer Food Service Program Appendix, and then the charts and exhibits that are required. So I'm going to turn it to Erica, and thank you.
Thanks, Sean. I am going to be starting on page 24 of this PDF, which is page 46 of the actual RFP document. As Sean said, I'll be talking about Appendix A, the Summer Food Service Program. I just wanted to point out that if you are operating or will be operating the Summer Food Service Program, a bid bond and performance bond are required to be submitted by the Food Service Management Company. On the next page, number 10, number 10 lists the bonding requirements. So depending on the value of the bid submitted by the Food Service Management Company, the Food Service Management Company may need to obtain a bid bond in an amount not less than 5%, nor more than 10% of the value of the contract for which the bid is made. So in 10A, if you want a bid bond of more than 5% to be submitted, you should indicate that here. And then in 10B, the Food Service Management Company that's selected must submit a performance bond in an amount not less than 10% and no more than 25% of the value of the contract for which the bid is made. You as the sponsor shall require the Food Service Management Company to furnish a copy of the performance bond within 10 days of awarding the contract. And once again, in 10B, if you want the performance bond to be more than the 10%, you also need to indicate that here. Food Service Management Companies are aware of this and know what to do for these. So You just need to indicate if you want it to be a different percentage than what we have listed here. On to the next page. And maybe we want to zoom out just a little bit. 150, yeah, there we go. On page 51 of the RFP is the beginning of the charts and exhibits. And this is where you're going to need to start creating that picture of your food service program for someone who may have no idea about your facilities or how your food service program operates. The first exhibit here is Exhibit A, site information. On this chart, it just lists some general data about each feeding site that should be completed by the SFA. Make sure that you list all feeding sites where food is prepared or eaten, and be sure to list any alternative feeding sites or vended locations here as well. I just wanted to also add, if you have too many sites to fit on this chart, you can add additional pages, or you can put this information in a document that you create containing this same information. You can see in this example that they have listed the high school, the middle school, the elementary schools, their preschool, the school store, and the private school and childcare in town that they contract meals to. So all of those should be listed on this chart here. You also need to indicate if the meals are prepared on site or if they're prepared at a satellite location, and if they are sent in bulk or as a pre-packaged unitized meal. And then another important column here on this chart is the number of serving days. You want to make sure that this is accurate, because a lot of time in the company's assumptions for their outcomes or guarantees, they will say that it's based on a certain number of serving days. And so, for example, maybe the preschool only goes Monday through Thursday, so they have a different number of serving days than the high school and middle school do. And in the additional information box, you should add or explain anything that you think would be important for the food service management company to know, as we have here in this example. I won't read through the whole thing. You can read through that for some ideas. But the more detailed you can be and the better picture you can create of your school food service department, then just hopefully you'll have to answer fewer questions from the food service management companies and fewer questions from us too, a little bit less back and forth between us trying to figure out what's going on at your location. And then continuing on with Exhibit A on the next chart. This chart is just meant to be a snapshot picture of the services provided at each location. Once again, on the left-hand side, you'll want to list all the feeding locations where food is prepared or delivered, and include those alternate feeding sites and contracted and vended locations here again on this chart as well. Some things to point out here is you do need to declare if the food service management company needs to provide those contract meals. And if you're not sure what a contract meal is, those are meals that are sold or to other SFAs or organizations for which the SFA has a vendor agreement with. And then also on this chart is the morning and afternoon milk break. These are non-reimbursable service that some schools provide to elementary grades. So if you do that, be sure to list the grades offered this service in that additional information box. Indicate if the food service management company is responsible for providing the milk for the milk breaks, and if any other snack or food items are provided, include if the FSMC needs to provide those as well. Also indicate if it's paid from the general fund or how it's paid for. In the other column, we have marked that for SSO for program, since you're operating the SSO program in school year 21-22. And then also indicated, which site would have just been a regular SFSP site if you're a regular SFSP sponsor in a normal school year in non-COVID times. The additional information box, like I said, include the non-reimbursable AM PM snack, any preschool, if your preschool served in the classroom, family style, indicate that here. If you offer grab and go breakfast or lunch, and also indicate the seamless summer option in the additional information box. Next page. And the last piece of Exhibit A is this, for the site information, is to include a copy of any of those vendor agreements you have with other SFAs or organizations. And then also attach your sponsor and site applications for all programs the SFA participates in. So for the school meals program, that would include, I have a screenshot down there, that would include your sponsor application highlighted in yellow, and then also your site applications and the seamless summer application highlighted in yellow. You'll want to either save those as a PDF or print those, whatever works best for you. So for all those sponsor and site applications that you participate in, if you operate the summer food service program, also print that sponsor and site application, and the same for the child and adult care food program, include those sponsor and site applications as well. Compile all of that and label it as Exhibit A, site information. And those sponsor and site applications, I don't know if I said, but those can be printed from the Nutrition Services website. You're probably familiar with filling those out, or your bookkeeper is. So, next page talks about menus. You must submit 21 days worth of menus for each program the school participates in. And a common mistake we see here, or something that we kind of commonly have to ask back for, is that when you submit the menu, it might have had, of course the month had at least 21 days, but make sure it has 21 feeding days on it. So you may need to submit 2 months worth of menus to get those 21 feeding days, as a lot of those months might just have 20 feeding days. So make sure you have 21 days worth of menus, and then be sure to include menus for all grade levels if those menus are different. So a lot of times maybe the elementary might have a different menu from the middle school or the high school, and different number of choices. So maybe the elementary only has 3 entree choices, but the high school has 7 entree choices or something like that. So make sure that you indicate which grades those menus are for, and include all the different grade levels and all the different menus you have for each of those grade levels. Your menus can be from this school year, even though you're operating the seamless summer option. The regular school lunch and school breakfast program meal patterns still must be followed. So just your menu from this year is okay. If the preschoolers are served in the classroom or eat in a separate area, they are following the CACFP meal pattern, which is a different meal pattern. So you do need to submit a separate menu for the preschoolers if they eat separately in the classroom or in a separate area of the cafeteria, and are not what we call co-mingled. So that's something you may need to find out. And then also submit a list of a la carte items, your current a la carte offerings and selling prices for all those items that are sold a la carte. And then don't forget to include the menus for any of those vended programs. Label those as well for which location those are for, and include those menus. And then, of course, if you operate the after-school snack program, the fresh fruit and vegetable program, if you're a regular summer food service program sponsor, or you operate the child and adult food program, you would have menus for those programs as well. Another thing to point out here is you can also request that the FSMC submit a 21-day menu for a program that you anticipate that you're going to participate in the future. So a lot of times schools are maybe close to getting to the percentage to be able to participate in the fresh fruit and vegetable program, and they think that they might get that grant in the future. So they've like in this example here, said that the SFA plans to participate in the fresh fruit and vegetable program in the future. And so they want the food service management company to submit a menu to show what would be served for that program as well. And then compile all of those and label those as Exhibit B, the menus, and include those as part of your attachment to the RFP. And then moving on to Exhibit C. Food service management companies can access your most recent annual financial reports on the NDE website. So they can, those can be found there. You will be filling out this revenue and expense form for the previous school year, for school year 2021. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through this line by line, but just keep in mind as you're filling this out that financial information is obviously very important to FSMCs as they prepare bids. So the more accurate and detailed you can be, hopefully that will also help you obtain the best fixed price for your program as well. And go back up just a little bit, Ali. For the revenues from cash sales, this information can be gathered from your point of service sales reports and then should be reported in the categories listed here. For last school year, you may not have had any paid student breakfast or lunches since students ate free under the summer food service program. But you did probably, however, have a la carte sales, adult meal sales, and possibly some of those other line items depending on what your school offered in school year 2021. You may have had some paid students in August or September of school year 2021, depending on when you chose to switch to the summer food service program. So under the state and federal reimbursement or funding, this information you can gather from your claims. And remember, for school year 2021, most, if not all of your reimbursement came from the summer food service program claims. And the USDA planned assistance level, that PAL listed there, this is the amount of USDA foods, or like Sean said, formerly known as commodities, that you received for that school year. And a link to the USDA Foods website can be found in chart 6 of this RFP. So that's where you can get that information. And the other thing I wanted to point out is if you if you did have a general fund transfer for school year 2021, an FSMC will probably want to know why that was. So make sure to indicate that in that fillable text box there by the general fund transfer as well. On the next page.
I think can everyone hear Erica? No. I'm afraid her internet connection may be a little unstable.
Mostly
Erica, we need you to go stand by a window. Your voice isn't coming through. She's going to rejoin us in a minute, but I can go ahead and take over for while she rejoins us. expenses, gross food cost. If you are self-operating, you had costs. Okay, you had food costs, you had supply costs, you had labor costs, you had all those costs that you pay for. And if you had a cost reimbursable contract, you had food costs. That only applies to one of our participants today, but you would indicate all of your expenses to the program in this section. And Erica mentioned the USDA foods. Once again, chart 6 has that information on where you can obtain that information. In our next section on the page, we have food service management company salaried employees. And once again, that pertains to one of our participants today that had a cost reimbursable contract, which is no longer allowed, but will be going to a fixed price. And Erica's back.
I think I'm back. Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay.
And we're to district salaried employees.
Okay. Sorry about that. I'm going to turn my camera off to help with my internet here. Okay. Okay, for district salaried employees, just to include any district staff that are paid by the district. And you can go ahead and go to the next page, Allie. The FSMC fees, once again, only applies if you had a cost reimbursable contract. And the FSMC direct expenses, since the budget does not have a line to enter the amount that the SFA paid directly to the FSMC, we suggest that you could enter that amount here if you have a fixed price contract. And then the SFA direct expenses are any other purchases or vendors paid from the nonprofit food service account in school year 2021. Explain any equipment purchases, repairs, anything else that you feel would be important for a food service management company to know in those fillable text boxes. And once again, the more information you can provide on these expenses, the better. On this budget, I just wanted to point out that you don't have to put something in every category, only those that you had an actual revenue or an expense for. And then at the bottom, you'll just enter the name of who completed the information. On the next page, due to the COVID waivers, like Sean said, FSMCs have expressed that it's important to see how things operated in the food service account, for pre-COVID times, as well as what is currently taking place now. So school year 18-19 was the last complete school year that your food service operated normally or operated just the National School Lunch and School Breakfast program. So because of that, we have asked that you submit a copy of your SFA's school board approved school food service budget for school year 18-19, 19-20, 20-21, and 21-22. And then your vendor paid list for the nonprofit school food service account for the previous school year, which would be July 1st through June 30th. The vendor paid list should not include any student lunch account information. So please either don't include that information or black out the student names if you're not able to remove them. This is a public document, and so we don't want to have any identifiable student information in this document or the attachments. This vendor paid list can also help you complete those SFA direct expenses on the previous page that we just talked about as well. And then just compile all of that and label it as Exhibit C. Exhibit D, the first page here, just lists all the charts and attachments that are included as part of Exhibit D. And it indicates if the forms are found in this RFP document, if the chart is something that you'll be completing as part of the RFP document, or if you need to compile it and attach it to the RFP. Also refer, like we said, you can refer to that checklist that we provided, which will be helpful in compiling all those documents to make sure you've included everything. Chart 1A is the labor worksheet for the school, for the SFA. It should be based on the current school year, so for school year 21-22. And list any staff that have food service responsibilities. So if you currently have a FSMC, sometimes you still commonly have like a bookkeeper or secretary that does the point of service or submits the monthly claims for reimbursement. So, and if you were previously self-operated, this would include all of the food service employees on this chart here. Be sure to indicate if the position will continue to be retained by the SFA for the term of the contract, and then indicate if they're paid from the general fund or if you pay their wages or part of their wages out of the nonprofit school food service account. Chart 1C is the fringe benefit cost worksheet for the school food authority. Once again, this would be for school year 21-22. And I just wanted to point out here, this chart only, it asks for employee name, but you could add some additional information like the position title to help link it back to that previous chart. But other than that, just fill out the information if any of the benefits are, paid by the general fund or the nonprofit school food service account for staff that work in the food service, have any food service responsibilities. Next page. For charts 2A, 2B, and 2C, these are the SFA Specification Worksheets. There's one for breakfast, one for lunch, and one for snacks sold to other programs. You'll want to include information for school year 18-19, 19-20, and 20-21 on each of these charts. The free adult meals are meals paid from the nonprofit food service account for district staff members that are directly involved with meal service. And the other ones are pretty self-explanatory. So if you have questions as you're filling this out, you can contact your specialist. In chart 2D, you'll want to attach your point of service sales summary reports. So on these include student meal counts, a la carte sales, and adult meal counts. You will include the summary report for school year 18-19, 19-20, 20-21, and then a year-to-date summary report, so like August through December for school year 21-22. And the keyword here is summary, so we only want summary reports, so either monthly totals or a year in total. You do not need to include detailed transactions for individual days or individual students or anything like that. We just want the summary report that gives you like the total number of meals and total amount of a la carte sales for those years. Chart 3 is prices for students and adult meals. So in school year 21-22, all students are eating free. And so just indicate what paid price the paid price would have been, or your last set paid price for 21-22. And then for your projected 22-23 prices, base those on, what we would say is a normal school year, whatever that means moving forward. So your normal paid prices. And moving on to chart 4. This is where you indicate the SFA's charge policy. So choose the option that best describes your school's charge policy before COVID feeding, and list the food items offered as applicable. Also remember to attach a copy of the district's charge policy and label that as chart 4. And then chart 5 is copies of the reimbursement claims. So all of your reimbursement claims can be found on the Nutrition Services CMP website for all programs that you participate in. And for those claims, you'll need to submit claims for the current school year, August through December, and then also for the 3 prior school years. So school year 18-19, 19-20, and school year 2021. All of those would be August through May. And we want you to print those in the summary view, which shows the site meal details. And we'll show you that down on a screenshot down at the bottom here in a minute. But because we have switched programs so many times in the last couple of years, you will have claims for the school lunch and breakfast claims. You'll have summer food service program claims, and you will have seamless summer option claims. Basically, just look through those years and make sure that you gather all claims that you were paid for during those school years. Those comments in the red box are just a guide of which program those claims may be under for which school years. When you are saving the claims as a PDF or printing them, be sure that you click on the summary view in the CMP system, and then click on show site meal details. And that will show how many meals were claimed at each individual site. So that'll bring all the sites up for you and show each individual site. Chart 6 is the USDA Foods Entitlement Allocations and Usage for school year 2021 and school year 21-22. We have linked to the DHHS CNP website here, and so you can find that information under the entitlement on that website. If you still have questions or need help finding that information, you can contact Chad Moore or Brian Gerkensmeyer at the emails and phone numbers listed there on the screen. Chart 7 is just your school calendar for school year 22-23. And we realized by the time you submit this RFP, maybe you don't have a finalized calendar yet, so draft form is sufficient. Just label that as chart 7 and attach it. Chart 8 is the designation of program expenses and duties. And once again, this is an important chart. You need to indicate if the FSMC or the SFA will be responsible for that particular expense or duty. And add any additional clarifications or information in the fillable text boxes as needed. On the next page, I just wanted to point out that under the equipment and facilities, just please note that in a fixed price contract, USDA does not allow bill backs or cost reimbursable pieces inside of a fixed price contract. So expenses for small wares or other small items cannot be purchased by the FSMC and then billed back to the district outside of that fixed price per meal. So you're probably going to want to mark that the replacement of expendable minor equipment is a FSMC expense, and then that will be those expenses will just be included as part of the fixed price. Moving on. The other one I wanted to point out was the point of sale accountability. So make sure that matches up with, what you've marked earlier in the RFP, and mark, if the FSMC will be in charge of the point of sale, or if the SFA will be in charge of the point of sale, or maybe, it will be some FSMC employees and some SFA employees. And in that case, you could mark both. The records supporting the claim for reimbursement, you're probably both going to be responsible for those. And then we have also just noted at the bottom, just make sure you specify any other requirements of employment. So we've listed, physicals or background checks, but if there's anything else that the district requires for employment, please list that under other and specify who would be responsible for that as well. Chart 9 is the equipment list by feeding site, and Allie will be discussing this spreadsheet in more detail coming up here. So we'll go ahead and move on to Exhibit F. Sean talked about this a little bit earlier in the presentation, but Exhibit F is your chance to ask for anything that was not in the RFP and provide you any additional information or clarifications. So we've provided some ideas for you that you can just check. You may mark any or all of these that you wish. So mark as many as you want, or as many that are applicable to you. You can also add your own, like they have in this example. So if there's additional things that you want to indicate, mark those here. Maybe you want to specify that you want more scratch cooking, or if you have a shared food service director, you might want to indicate how many days you would like them to be on site. You want these type of things to be in writing and included in your contract, so make sure to indicate those here. We've also talked about Exhibit K, the Independent Price Determination Certificate. This has to be completed and signed by both the SFA and the FSMC, and then submitted to your NDE program specialist as part of the final contract. So just wanted to point that out here, that this is an area that you need to sign. When we talked about the award criteria scoring, this is attachment 1. It is a scoring sheet that you can use. And we want you to submit the scoring sheets for each committee member and the total combined scoring sheet to your NDE specialist. So each committee member should score the proposals separately and independently. We've on the left, you list your total possible points. So from your what you indicated back in the RFP, list how many possible points there are. And then on the right, you can list each FSMC that you received a proposal from and the costs or the points that you want to assign to those. And if you need to explain anything, there is a comments area where you can, explain anything about your scoring as well. Attachment 2 is that list of FSMCs either operating or interested in operating in Nebraska. Like we said, there are 10 of those. So you'll want to email that notification that appears in the Omaha World Herald to all the FSMCs on this list. We've only included the first page in the sample, but it's actually 3 pages long. So make sure it's also available on our website, but make sure that you get all of the companies and include those and email them that notification. You can CC your NDE program specialists on that email because that's part of the documentation that needs to be submitted. Next page.
I think that's it, Erica.
Okay. All right, well, then we will, do we have
Yep,
time for a short break? Or?
Do you want a short break, Sean? We just have left a few slides in the PowerPoint, and then we'll finish up with question and answers. If you guys just give me maybe 2 minutes anyway to get transitioned back to the PowerPoint. Does that work?
That sounds like a great plan, Allie.
Good.
I am checking the chat to see if we have any questions in the chat. And I think we haven't had very many. And the one that was asked was answered. So this is your opportunity if you want to enter your questions in the chat. We will address those at the end, or feel free at the end to ask your questions without entering them in the chat. It's not showing on the screen yet, Allie. Now it is.
Okay. Like I said, we're coming to the last section of our presentation. We have a few PowerPoint slides to finish up. I'm going to be talking about the pre-proposal meeting, giving you some tips on the meeting and the tour. And then we just have a couple forms to additionally review, and then we can pause. And if there's any questions, we can do that at the end. So I feel good we're going to finish up in time. So we've talked a lot about this checklist. This is new, like Sean mentioned, this year. It's not only going to benefit you guys, it's also going to help keep us organized with where you're at in the process. So the checklist was emailed to you. There's, I believe, 3 pages to it. It's called the Rfp Package Document Checklist. And we mentioned throughout the RFP review that along with filling out sections in the RFP template, that you'll need to provide additional documents and information to complete the RFP package. So on the first page, which on the screen, I have the second page, but on the first page of this handout, we've provided a flow chart for you, and the flow chart will provide a guide on the RFP cycle. So if you're new to the process, it will tell you where you're at in the cycle. It'll tell you what's coming up and what to plan for. So that will help keep you on track. And then the second, well, and actually you can, if you have it pulled up, you can read in the flow chart that step 1 is to complete the RFP template, which we've just got done reviewing. And step 2 is to complete the template with all attachments. So you can see on the screen that, again, this is the checklist that has all the exhibits A through D. And the exhibits will require a variety of charts you will need to complete in the RFP template, which Erica just went through. And then attachments, you'll need to provide additional information, which Erica also shared. So make sure, it's very important that you label the exhibits, the exhibit attachments, the ones that you're going to attach, make sure they're labeled clearly and keep them organized. The completed RFP template and the labeled organized exhibits all become part of that final RFP package. So I would suggest printing this checklist, keeping it marked off so you know where you're at in the process. Use the flow chart to sort of check where you're at. You guys are providing a lot of information and it can become overwhelming keeping it all straight. So hopefully this checklist will help keep you organized. So next, I'm going to move on to and talk about the pre-proposal meeting. So when preparing for your pre-proposal meeting, which like Sean mentioned, will either be a hybrid option of on-site and virtual, or will be virtual only on a school day. There's just a few considerations we want to review. Make sure you have a system in place to record who is in attendance. An example of that could be a sign-in sheet that you pass around before the tour. If conducting a hybrid meeting, make sure you have someone to operate the camera for you, because those folks on the link will need to also see the tour. So it's probably not going to be the same person who's conducting the meeting. So just make sure you have someone lined up to help you out with that. And it's okay to mention at the beginning of the meeting that the food service management companies should submit questions in writing, with the understanding these will be answered by email and sent out to all food service management companies that attend the pre-proposal meeting. So in the next slides, we're going to talk about the importance of the actual tour. Maybe consider an agenda or a map if you're going to travel to several locations. I know some schools are small enough and they're all in one location. You'll have the meeting, you'll walk down maybe to the kitchen area. But if you're going to get in the car and travel around town to different buildings, it might be nice to have an agenda of where you're going next and maybe a map or an address of that location so you don't lose your group. So we've provided some examples in our pictures of things that you might want to focus on in your tour. The purpose of the tour is for the food service management company representatives to survey the school food service sites. The food service management company is looking to understand how your current food service program is operating. So the tour is critical to this understanding and will influence the menus, the offerings, could be staffing choices, and the costs contained in the proposal they present. They're going to be interested in all food service areas. So anything you can think of that pertains to food service, if you have time, take them there. You'll want to show them kitchen layouts. You'll want to show them serving areas and dining areas, equipment, refrigerated dry storage areas, including off-site storage areas if your location has them, and also the receiving areas or delivery docks that you have on your connected to your kitchens. Something else to consider is, does your school have a school garden or a greenhouse? That might be something that a food service management company would like to see. And if you're a school that does transport of meals, do you own a vehicle for transport? That might be an important visual for them to see how you're transporting those meals. Is it a van? Is it a truck? Those sort of things. So once you are in the sites, it's going to be important to focus on large kitchen equipment. Examples could be a convection oven, a range, steamers, holding proofing units. They're going to be interested in what equipment is available to them and the condition of the equipment. So make sure you're prepared for the tour. If you're not in the kitchens a lot, you may want to go down prior to the tour and make sure you know where everything is at. Make sure covers are removed off any type of equipment. A couple examples might be a food bar, if it's not being used, might be covered up, or a mixer. I know lots of kitchens will cover a mixer when they're not using it. So make sure those covers are off. Check with your kitchen staff prior and make sure that all the equipment is out. Sometimes I know they have equipment tucked away in storage areas that might not be in the kitchen, or it might be in a locked area that you need to make sure you have access to. Other things to consider are your self-serve bars, any specialty bars that you guys are doing, condiment bars and stations, and then include, of course, the serving lines. You'll want to be able to explain how the students come through the serving line into the serving area. They'll want to know where the students are sitting to eat their meals, and then they'll want to know how the students go through the process of returning a tray, if that's in the kitchen or if there's another window to the dish room. So you'll need to know the flow of the lunch line through the service area. And if you're using self-serve bars, make sure you point out where they're all at. I feel like sometimes when you're showing how the kids go through, maybe the bars might get missed. So, if you don't have them, is there room to add them? Or if you have food bars in storage and you're currently not using them, again, make sure that you're aware of that and showing this to the company. Food service management companies are going to be very interested in a la carte sales. So a question to ask yourself is, do you currently have these options? And if you do, make sure you know where they're located and how they're displayed. They're going to want to see that currently what you're doing. Do you have a school store maybe? So you could head down there and show them the school store. Make sure you're aware of any food service vending machines and where they're at and how many there are and how the students would access them. And along with the serving line, make sure you touch on the cashier stations, the POS stations, or where the students go to check out after they've received their meal. Make sure you know where they're located, how many of them there are. This would also include the milk coolers, usually towards the end of the line sometimes. Any milk coolers in the service line. Sometimes there's milk coolers tucked away back in the kitchen to hold extra milk. How is drinking water provided? Do you have fountains nearby? Do you have a water station? That's important to them. They are very interested in dining areas. So again, you know, where are the students eating or where are they gathering at mealtime? If there's not enough room in the dining area, is there an area that they gather around lunchtime? So showing these areas is important because they may propose ideas on creating additional interest to increase meal participation. And then finally, for the tour, the size of the refrigerators and freezers is really important to the management companies. They need this information to determine frequency of ordering, food delivery sizes, and storage capacity, which all impacts your food quality and your menu options. The dish room or pot and pan area where the children would bring their trays at the end of lunch is important to determine what type of serviceware, cooking equipment can be used, and maybe the labor needs for that program. Some other important things that might get missed is, are you currently using washable trays and silverware? If so, you know, make sure you show the company your supply of that. If you're not, you know, be sure to point out that you're using disposables because that will affect, again, their plan proposed to you. Anything that is used to cook and serve your students will be of interest to the food service management companies. So again, just taking a little time to plan your tour, be prepared to show the food service areas during the tour and give as much information as you can that will help them visualize their program in your sites. So that concludes the tour tips, and hopefully, you know, that will give you some guidance on how to successfully have a pre-proposal meeting and tour for your companies. We're going to move on to the very last slide we have. I'm going to just review one last form. And this form is one of the attachments that you'll be including. And this was sent in that email from Sean. It's an Excel spreadsheet, and it's equipment by feeding site workbook. It's actually Exhibit D. So due to the limited amount of time to tour and maybe the potential of not seeing every feeding site, it's going to be necessary to provide the management companies with a completed checklist of your current equipment. So to complete the list, I would ask your food service directors or kitchen managers or someone in the kitchen who's familiar with using these items every day to help you. They know the equipment, and knowing the equipment name, the proper name, is important here. So you can create a list by site. So each site will need to have a completed list, and then mark the number of items. You can see in the example up here, is there one of them? Is there two of them? And then mark if they're district owned or food service management company owned. And in general, most items are going to be owned by the district. And I think just some other points on the spreadsheet, when you open it up, there are two tabs at the bottom. One tab is equipment list. So it's going to be large and small equipment like salad bars and ovens, things that probably don't move real well. And then the second tab is more of a smallwares list. So it's going to be all the scoops, dishers, spatulas, those things that are definitely needed, you know, sheet pans to run a program, and a food service management company is going to be interested in how many of those you have on hand. If you have multiple sites, you can save a new workbook for each site and then complete it. Or if you know how to run Excel pretty good, or reach out to one of us, we can create copies of the tab within one workbook so that you can have a tab for each site. So if you're struggling with that, just reach out to us. And I would encourage your kitchen staff, this is something that they can get started inventorying right away, as it might take them some time to complete the list, because it takes a lot of time to count everything. So they could work on it a little bit here and there. That way you have it ready when you're ready to submit your final RFP package. So I think that explains that a little bit. And once you have it completed, you'll just want to save it and label it and keep it as an attachment, like Erica mentioned when she was going through the template. And I think that's it. So this is the last slide. We're